So, I've had 2 weeks to kind of internalize Jormag Rising, and it's not my favorite. Also, my hair's a little bit of a bird's nest right now, but we'll have to deal with it. So, welcome everyone. Jormag Rising has been out for a day officially, but I've of course had some time to kind of process it, cope with it, and think about it quite a lot. So I understand that my opinions and the way I feel about this tour might be a bit different because I've had time to sit on it. Some people might not have, though. Some people might have come to the conclusion that I've come to on their first playthrough, but it's just taken me like a week to do it. So let's begin. I guess I'll go through the story first and then go to the meta as a whole and the map extension. So, Rise of Jormag. It's the episode after No Quarter, which takes place in the Drizzlewood Coast, and it's about Jormag Rising. Surprising that the title will allude to it. So, the story. I mean, the beginning is pretty nice. It sets the tone effectively. It's like any other beginning story for the most part. Um, though I would have liked to see the actual ice wall retreat back because they specifically mention and specifically state that the ice wall didn't melt, it retreated, and I think that would have been physically impressive and cool to show Jormag's power. I mean, when you tend to reference things off screen, especially awesome things off screen, it's a little sad when they don't actually show up in game. But that might have not really been worth the developer's time programming all that. So I don't want to really use that as an excuse because it just excuses anyone from going to the most extremes of any game developing and like really making something spectacular. But I digress. I would have liked to see it retreat, but I guess I understand why they didn't have it. It was kind of just in passing. It was like, oh, it retreated. So did that wall become a part of the Citadel? I don't know. But it was weird wording. But for the first instance as a whole, you're just setting up your own foothold. You're going through these caves, you're destroying cannons. There's a nice little cinematic shot of a camera panning through, and it's nice. It's like you're going there and you're killing things and you're setting up a place for your allies. So it was fine. It worked. It was effective. Was I riveted at any point? Not really. Um, there's some ice brew char. We get to the middle. And then, well, after the first instance, you have some open world sabotage that you have to do. And then you end up reconvening in the cave. The open world sabotage was pretty easy and it was kind of skippable. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. Um, kind of there. I genuinely don't know why they made you do all that actually. But nevertheless, we end up reconvening at the cave at the little hideout. And I wasn't really expecting anything much to happen because it was the middle instanced story step, and those don't really blow up or anything. It's kind of just you're discussing and it's expository and it's getting you to the climax of the episode. So I really wasn't expecting a lot. But then it started to go into, oh, you have to choose which plan you want to go with. Do you want to go with Bram's plan of opening the door, using the spirits of the wild, or do you want to go with Bangar's decision and just do a full frontal assault? So all this happens, we go over the plans, and I was really shocked. I was like, whoa, we're going to have the option to literally change the way we actually execute this story to get to the final instance. No, just kidding. So in the middle of that story instance, Smoda gets shot in the head and dies. I would say we assume, but Ritlock does definitively say this could have gone smoother without a bullet in Smoder's head. So, Smoder's dead. And I would always like to say I don't know how I feel about this, but I'd be lying. I do know how I feel about this. I don't think this is really good. It was kind of delivered pretty poorly, in my opinion. Part of me is happy that they didn't have a cinematic for it. Part of me was really happy that they actually kept you in game and they just took control of your camera to kind of look at it. And yeah, that was kind of cool. So I liked that to some degree. But then I also kind of took a step back and was like, but this is Smoder. This is like a really big character, not only in terms of the char, but as the overall narrative of the Icebrute saga. Smoder's been the one who's really goading Ryland and Bangar and is really the last glimpse at what the Char used to be in terms of like keeping the Char's race flavorful on a fantasy level in terms of like making them interesting and unique because the Char is supposed to be hardened and like take no prisoners and will kill people for like trying to defect. And it was kind of jarring when it first happened when we saw Smoder killing his own. And I was like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. But then I was like, that's the human talking in me. It's like, if I was a char, I'd probably hold that feeling too. And then all of a sudden we have all these char like, oh no, we shouldn't be doing that. And it's like, but what was their motivation? What was their, were they always good? Because they all really throw their children into Farrars. Are they getting rid of that? Are we actually seeing the base char become the Omicron? But then why set up the Omicron as like a completely distinct group of char? I didn't even think of that until now. The Omicron and the char are basically the same thing, and it kind of defeats the Omicon's purpose and Rox's entire purpose. Now that the char are kind of all getting buddy buddy and like being morally righteous and morally good, objectively morally good in almost all the situations. So I really enjoyed Smoder as a character because he was going against the grain in terms of what is morally right. He wasn't necessarily worried about what was ethical. He just worried about, you know, winning the war. And the winning of the war was his objective moral truth and moral goodness. Because I don't think it's necessarily questionable. I think he did really disagree with the way Bangar was going. And I think he did disagree with, going after an elder dragon to try to tame it. So Smoder was always on our side. And then you have him unceremoniously killed in this ambush, which was really weak. It was a pretty weak ambush. It really only felt like Smoder was the only one killed in the ambush. And plus, it was an ambush within a really small cave. It didn't feel like we were at like our headquarters or we were at the Citadel. So the setting was a little lackluster because we never really developed the setting. We won it in the very first one. Now, if we went back to our old hideout and then Smoder died there, that would have made a little bit more sense because we already had an episode where we invaded like the Dominion area in the first half of the map. But it's just he dies in this little cave. And then everybody suddenly forgets that he was there. And they all kind of get over it really quickly, which is really strange because it's like Smoder just died. Smoder just got headshot. And I don't know if it's because of the lack of voice acting, but even the way they write it, it seems kind of like, and then they never really mention again. And they're so quick to being like, who's going to replace him? It's not like, oh, damn. And if the Char really were starting to kind of, be morally good and be all one Char, they would probably value Smoder's death a little bit more and have at least a little bit more an emotional impact. So the Char right now are kind of a hodgepodgey mess of ethical and morality. And that's not good. I don't think. At all. It's not even like vague. It's literally just like the things you guys are saying and going for just don't make sense at all. And you can say we're all one Char, But then one of your own dies, and you're kind of just like, well, time to replace him. So it's like, why? I could have a whole entire video on Smoder's death, and maybe I will actually commit to adding a little bit more right now. Yes. In addition to Smoder's death, we had that kind of interesting setup where Smoder basically kills some of Malice's agents in the episode No Quarter, and it was hinted that at the end of that episode, she was like, "Oh yeah, I had a." Malice reveals that she had double agents, and then we're kind of like, "Oh my god, we threw a grenade that Smoder went and told us to throw the grenade down and kill the Char, but the Char that we killed ended up being our allies." So it was this weird dichotomy of how are these two leading Char forces going to interact with each other, and it felt like kind of a dud when that potential for a story and that potential for a civil conflict, an internal conflict, just is kind of automatically hard eliminated. It's not a conclusion to that dynamic, it's a hard stop. Death can be someone's conclusion if you write it in such a way that is really fulfilling and symbolic. But in most cases, death isn't a conclusion to a character's ending or a character's story. It's just a hard stop and a way to not give them an ending in a proper way. Like Traherne. Traherne's death, I think, was a proper ending because he was Sylvari and he was in Morgermoth's grasp. So his death felt more like a conclusion. Smoder's just feels like a death that really wasn't earned. And it wasn't even a cinematic to make it feel earned. And that's another part of Smoder's death. We have Smoder, a character that has been very much established in Vanilla Guild Wars 2 and throughout, and is a main Char. I mean, let me quickly look up, just to make sure that I have all the facts right. Yeah, he's the Imperator of the Iron Legion. He's an Imperator. He's throughout the personal story, he's throughout Living World 2, and then we have Smoder, a character who's been well established and utilized throughout the entire narrative of Guild Wars 2. And then we get the episode No Quarter, and we have this entire beautiful cinematic dedicated to the killing of a character. Vishen, was it? I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it was Vishen. It was one of Ryland's warband members. But we have a cinematic dedicated to the killing of a character who was just introduced and established in the prior episode to episode 3. Visions of the Past. Why do they get a cinematic death scene that has a little bit more gravitas and weight to it and shocking because of the amount of effort and amount of articulation that you can put into such animations? Why is that granted to her, that character that was just introduced? And then we have Smoder, the Imperator of the Iron Legion, randomly headshotted in a cave with no cinematic, no lead up, just shotted and dead. That is the proper tense. He was shotted. So, yeah. Smoder's death is really disappointing. I don't think it really was earned. But you could also argue nothing's really earned in war. It's just a game of war. But you typically save that for lesser characters and not literal leaders of the Iron Legion. It's like if suddenly we all just shot Bangar dead in the head in a middle episode chapter. A middle chapter of an episode. Yeah. So we all decided to go over Smoder, and Smoder is no longer a thing, and then we're going to go replace him with someone named Mia, who really has no lead up. They say that she was supposedly there during a couple instances of fighting the dragon, and I think she's a part of the vigil. But there's also this, no, because then there's also like this Doomforged character, and I thought she was going to be the replacement. I don't understand why she's there necessarily. She's a part of, oh, she's Krisha's, Krisha? No, not Krisha. She's the vigil's, I already forgot all the Char names. Wow, I'm really professional. Keeper. Yes, that one Char character is Soul Keeper's granddaughter. Grand Char. So she's just there to kind of represent Soul Keeper, I guess. I don't know why. And Then we say we have to go get Mia, and we don't really know who Mia is. They say that she was there. I don't really remember her at all. At least she wasn't super impactful that I can remember. Like, I didn't even know Mia was on Dragonfall or any of the other dragon pursuits. So I don't know if replacing her with, or replacing Smoder with this random Char character is gonna work out either. Because then they're just gonna throw her in probably next episode and be like, lead! You have the same ideology of us, so there's no inter conflict within the party. And it's all kind of, homogenous. But it's not really Char. It's not the Char way, it's the Omicron way. But the Char, the Omicron. So I don't know. It's all a little weird. So I talked a really long amount of time about that, and I'm sorry. So now we're going to go to the ending of the Jormag Rising story. So, the ending. So we finally make it to Jormag. In here we kind of mess up the timelines a little bit if you really take everything into consideration with the meta event and the story instance, because we fight our way, in the story instance, we fight our way to Jormag and his room. Well, first we get the Norn door open, and then we subsequently get a bunch of other doors open. There are a lot of doors in this episode, even in the meta event. So we get to Jormag, and then we call down Ephraim and Malice. At least I think Malice was there too. And they're supposed to be leading the assault. So they come down, and then they do it. But at the same time, within the meta event timeline, at least they make it appear like this is the proper timeline. In the meta, they're still leading the assault with Casimir. And Casimir isn't in the final instance either. So you would probably expect Ephraim, Malice, and Casimir to be in the final story instance. But Casimir isn't. But she's in the meta with Ephraim and Malice, who are supposed to be doing this at the exact same time. It's very strange. And someone might argue like, oh, but Heart of Thorns' meta was kind of like that, with fighting the mouth of Mordramoth. And to some point you're correct. They do mention you in the Heart of Thorns Dragon Stand meta as commander. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense that the commander's fighting the fight with the mouth of Mordramoth while also fighting Mordramoth himself at the proper time. At least that's when the storylines are supposed to be happening. There's a fight outside distracting Mordramoth, and the commander goes inside with the other people. But the thing is, you could easily fix that by referring to the commander out in the open world as just soldier, like a random soldier. And I feel like they could probably make so many more cohesive storylines and timelines if they just use that one simple literary trick. Instead of out in the open world, random people referring to you as commander, if they just mentioned you as soldier or like mage or like adventurer, you could probably fix a lot of the timelines in Guild Wars 2. But they don't really do that. They often make everyone refer to you as commander, no matter what. But with Heart of Thorns, you could fix that by having the open world just refer to you as like adventurer or soldier. But the thing with the Heart of Thorns storyline is within the instance, all of the instance characters they're not out in the open world. They're completely isolated to the story step. While here, it's really strange because Ephraim and Malice are not isolated to the meta event. They're also in the story step at the exact same time, with this mission of riding into a Char helicopter and dropping down into the place. But that never happens in the meta. So I'm not sure when they're necessarily doing this. The timeline's kind of messed up. It's not really clear. So, yeah. But regardless, we make it to Jormag. We blast open his door. And it doesn't really make sense why Ephraim was needed to break down the ice. Like, they really didn't need Ephraim there at all. I don't think Ephraim really served any purpose other than to just add an extra little small flame beam and be like, ooh, he's a flame shaman. So he really wasn't needed. And I don't think Malice was needed either. And I'm pretty sure Malice showed up. I mean, I could honestly be forgetting and Malice didn't show up, but I'm pretty sure she did. Then we fight Bangar, and we go into the room, and Bangar's there, and he's siphoning the spirits, And Bram and everyone's like, oh no, you don't, ho. And we start fighting him. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this fight in terms of giving Bangar so much toughness that your attacks are doing like literally 100 ticks of damage. You could also do this the same way by just giving him so much more health in terms of prolonging the fight. But I enjoy this because it makes you feel a little bit weaker, of course, but it also prevents you from just killing him in an instant and making the story beat feel much smaller and shorter. So I appreciate that. In addition to this, there are phases where you have to go do some other things. It's just normal fight stuff. It's pretty fun. It is a good. Oh, I'm out of focus. It is pretty nice. I got back in focus. It's pretty nice, I'll say. It's super cool. It's kind of basic. You do a little puzzle thing, which I guess is the most standout portion of the fight, is the puzzle. But I didn't really feel like in danger of my life at most moments. Actually, you know what? I think this was fight. This was a fine fight. I did go down, I think once or twice when I played it on live. So, you might have a little bit of trouble actually. So, overall, this was a pretty neutral middle ground fight. Middle of the fight with Bangar, Ryland comes in out of nowhere and just opens a portal and is there. And he has the bow. And then Ryland's like, you said you weren't going to use this bow against Jormag. And it seems like he's starting to defend Jormag, or something's going a bit strange. So you're kind of on him, and you're like, what's happening? What's happening with you? So that's when you do the puzzle part. Then Ryland and everyone defeats Bangar, but not actually. They didn't actually kill Bangar. Bangar phases and becomes immune, of course. But then he calls on Jormag, and Jormag happens to awaken. But it also doesn't really feel like anything happened to make Jormag awaken. Because we killed the spirit thing, siphoning the spirits, and then we did the puzzles, and it wasn't like Bangar like shot juice at Jormag. Jormag just kind of wakes up, and it's kind of like Bangar's like, Jormag, rise, and you're like, it was that easy to command an elder dragon to kind of just wake up? Like, okay. He also didn't like shoot any arrow. He didn't like grab Ryland's bow, or technically Air's bow. Well, now Bram's bow, which is now Ryland's bow. He didn't like take the bow and like shoot a flaming arrow to melt it and like free Jormag, because that could have been cool. You'd be like, yeah, he strikes Jormag's casing, but the arrow doesn't go all the way through. It just shatters the casing and Jormag wakes up. You'd have to shoot him again or shoot Jormag again to kill him, essentially. But Bangar doesn't want that. Bangar wants to be the champion, so he just frees Jormag. So I don't know why it's kind of just like, Jormag, it's time. And then Jormag's like, okay, I'm here. So that was a little awkward, but it's not necessarily a huge part of the story. It was just kind of like oh, okay, this is happening now. And then we get the cutscene. And of course this is going to be the cinematic one, because there's always one cinematic with these episodes now, or at least that's how it's consistently been. So I'm only assuming they're going to continue to do that. So we get the cutscene for this episode, and it's Jormag, and it's really awesome that we get to see Jormag and Jormag's face. I like the design of Jormag. I'm interested to see Jormag's entire being. How large is Jormag? Is Jormag's body slightly different than like the claw of Jormag? I really hope so. But Jormag's face at least looks really interesting. Lewis 2 likes to just focus on the dragon's faces. They never really give you the whole entire dragon, really. Except Krathatoric. And Zaitan. I'll give them that. They did do Zaitan pretty well. The fight itself was but we're not going down that road. Not today. So, Jormag wakes up, and there's a cutscene, and Jormag and Bangar, well, yeah, Jormag tells Bangar, rise, voice of Jormag. Bangar becomes another voice of Jormag, but not the champion. So it's like, oh no, snap! You're getting enslaved. Haha, your plan didn't work. Ugh. And it's like, okay, yeah, he's getting his comeuppance. He's getting what he deserved. What did he expect? It's like, okay. And then Jormag will probably take him and then use him to do more bidding and like get more people and more Frost Legion. But no, he's just fodder. And then Ryland steps up out of nowhere. And Ryland doesn't really say much. Jormag kind of already has Jormag's plan going. Jormag starts talking to Ryland and is like, your father abandoned you. Your mother is disciplinary. All that rage bubbling underneath. And it's like, I didn't really see that. I mean, maybe guess in the last episode when Ryland said, oh, I trusted you. When Smoter, rest in peace, killed one of his warband. So maybe that might be the only probable cause, but Jormag makes it seem like this has been simmering up for like years. And we never really got that lead up or that build up. It just seemed like Ryland was a pretty normal Char living within the structure of the Char society. And this is normal. Yes, Char are hardened war creatures who have more aggression. But Jormag made it seem like that aggression was like super, like, he was like, oh, I'm sad. It wasn't like this hurrah. It just felt like even on Ryland's facial expression was like, oh, I'm so depressed. And that was also conflicting because Bangar and Ryland are the ones kind of upholding the status quo of what Char were like. They were more warlike, they were convincing people, they were using propaganda, they were actively leading a war. So they were the most Char-like in the traditional sense. But then Ryland is like, it's revealed really abruptly that Jormag wants him to be the champion because he's Ritlock's son and Krisha's son, and the quality of a father leaving and a disciplinary mother who still seemed to kind of care for the child until he went rogue. Like, all of a sudden that makes him special in some way? I don't think so. If anything, why isn't Jormag still using Bangar? I don't think Ryland fits the role as Jormag's champion at all. Any of the lead up is just kind of like, it didn't really work. There's no claim to fame that Ryland has to be Jormag's champion. And it's kind of like this like twist in the story that is just a twist. It's a twist for the sake of a twist, and it doesn't feel good. It would have been better if Bangar truly became the champion, but Bangar lost all consciousness. But you had like glimpses of that, like I'm the leader, and then Jormag is like, no, I am, and then like really takes control of him and racks him and turns Bangar into this weird amalgamation of ice, like monster ice and Saunir and ice brood, like weird Char. That would have been so cool. I would have been like, oh yes, he thought, and it would have been it would have been much more of a payoff because everybody was focusing on Bangar. The whole entire story episodes and the characters were like, Bangar can't control a dragon. Is he insane? And then it's like, yeah, he's now a part of the dragon, but he's now also a gift to us that we're going to be interrogating for this weird thing. And then Ryland, this side character who had some build up, but had no correlation or inkling to become the champion of Jormag, is now the champion. And it seems like, I mean, I don't know what Ryland has for consciousness in terms of like how much consciousness Jormag decided to give Ryland. But it's very strange. And it's weird. And I don't think it was earned necessarily. A lot more discussion that could be had with Jormag and Ryland and Bangar and so on and so forth. But I think I'll close that portion off for now. just for the sake of time and for the sake of editing. And afterwards, Jormag and Ryland disappear, presumably like in a cloud of smoke. I don't know how Jormag left. I think it would have been really cool if this cinematic continued and they had Ryland get on Jormag's back, and then Jormag like shot up out of the citadel and broke the ceiling, and then we saw Jormag kind of like Jormag's wingspan. We don't have to see the detail, but kind of like Oreen, where it's like just this faint silhouette, and then the cinematic cuts out, and then we presume that Jormag leaves. But Jormag just kind of like disappears in a cloud of smoke with Ryland. And then Bangar's left behind. What reason Jormag has leaving Bangar behind so we can interrogate him, I'm not sure. But then we go back to Oreen, and then we have this nice little thing with Oreen. I did like this. We got some more insight. And I guess this is where I'm concluding. But the story does seem a little bit interesting in terms of what Jormag is doing. I'm so much more interested in what Jormag is doing rather than Ryland or Bangar. And why have 4 episodes setting up Ryland and Bangar and the Legion, the Frost Legion, and then do nothing with them? And then, like, kind of make at least the player feel so much more interested in Jormag's agenda than anybody else's. It just felt like a really weird ending to the Frost Legion. Do I think the Frost Legion is ending? I don't think so. I think Ryland will try to recruit more, and I think there will be more Frost Legion. But I don't know how else to put it other than I'm so much more interested in Jormag than any of the Frost Legion at this point. And that might have only been natural when Jormag awoke. I think that is also just a natural thing. You're so much more interested in an Elder Dragon because the story has been built off the backs of Elder Dragons. So, yeah. That's where the story concludes for Jormag Rising. And overall, there were some very big moments where it was a really big disappointment in terms of the narrative of the story and the potential for story. And also the execution of story. The instances in the combat, of course, is what we've come to pretty much expect. It's pretty high quality. There are some nice mechanics, and they're at least lengthier. But the story also felt short, and the meta feels too long. But I'll have another episode and another video of myself talking about the meta. There's a lot to unpack with the meta as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Like the video if you liked it. Comment below your thoughts on the story for Rise of Jormag, or Jormag Rising. And I have a Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons. I'll have a slideshow, proudly right now, of your names. If you'd like to become a patron and get early access to my videos and some quality perks, please, if you would like to support me, or, give me a tip on PayPal. But I have a Twitch. I stream on Fridays and the weekends. I have a Twitch, a Twitter, a Discord, a Patreon, a PayPal, and I have an appetite and I'm hungry. So, like if you liked it, comment below your thoughts and subscribe for more videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone!